Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
When I grew up, I just kind of put all of that behind me. I did all the emotional work. As things came up, as things presented themselves, I would recognize them and I would tackle them. I'd never suppress. I never did any of that stuff, because if I kept that going, then that means those people won, that those people that hurt myself and my siblings won. So I rose above it and I healed myself, and I showed myself that they had no control.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi, this is Jake Eberly, and today Janie speaks with the incredibly positive and optimistic Cody Renegar. And despite his extremely difficult childhood and the brutality he suffered at the hands of the people who were supposed to take care of him, there were adults in his life that saw the difficulty he was going through and helped him. And now he's not only overcome his multi-generational trauma, but he's even written a book about it called Changing the Stars.
I am here with Cody Renegar. Hi, Cody. Thank you for being on my podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here. I appreciate the invite.
I want to hear about you. Who are you, Cody?
Oh, I love that question. And I'm not sure I ever answered it the exact same way twice. Who I am today, is a strong man, a healed man, someone who wants to share the pain and the struggles of my life with others in hopes that they can overcome theirs in the way I did. So I think that who I am today is just a strong man who wants to share that strength with everyone that I can.
Wow. So your book, Changing the Stars, very beautiful cover, by the way. How did you come up with that title? I know as a writer, titles are really hard.
It was so hard, and that's true. Do you know what? Changing the Stars is about my life and breaking the cycle of abuse that had plagued my family for generations.
And it's a memoir, right?
It's a memoir, right. So in Changing the Stars, I saw a movie a long time ago called A Knight's Tale, and in that Knight's Tale, the boy, his dad, knows that he can't give him the life that he wants him to have, so he kind of gives him, I guess, or to a knight. And anyway, whenever he gives him to this knight to be his squire, he says, change your stars. And so that's talking about kind of what the universe already has planned or whatnot, whatever you
right,
believe.
like changing your fate kind of thing?
Exactly, changing the fates.
Yeah.
What's happening to you is not written in the stars. You can change it. That's why I chose that.
Right, and this goes back to what you talked about before about generational trauma and abuse.
Right. You have the power.
Right, and that was true for you and your family.
100%, yeah. Another thing about Changing the Stars is now I'm a hairstylist and I work with a lot of celebrities, so it kind of played on changing the stars and changing my stars. And I did the painting of the cover that you could...
Oh, you did that too? That's beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
It's beautiful. You talked about generational trauma and generational abuse. Talk to me about that.
Well...
What happened to you?
Well, let's go back to my mother. My mom, actually, her father and his brother had sex with my mother her entire life, since her earliest memories, until she married my father when she was 18 years old. And she didn't understand the difference. And I'm sure that stuff had happened to them somehow, and then in turn them, I mean, it was just a disgusting, and it's plagued many aspects of that birth family. My mom and dad were together, had two older sisters and myself, and then they ended up separating because my mom was looking for love in all the wrong places, and he found her with his best friend. and like took off. Anyway, she took off, and we were ended up homeless. We had no plan, so we were just abandoned on the street. My mom didn't know where we were most of the time. She would put us in these abandoned homes, and she became so strung out on drugs, and she became a prostitute. And she would just tuck us away in these. We lived under a bridge for a while. We lived under a booth in a bar for a while. We lived in abandoned houses in the woods all through like South Arkansas and East Texas.
Right, and you remember all this, right?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, and I know that was a pretty big help, a big tool for me in writing my memoirs. That some of my earliest memories were as an infant, and then what I couldn't remember, or what I couldn't quite piece together, my two older sisters, who are 3.5 and 4.5 years older than I, helped me with. And also, every time we were taken out in and out of the home in these emergency receiving shelters, and the police would arrest, all these different times, I have all of the documents from those intake papers from my entire life.
Wow, you were able to get a hold of those.
Well, my sister was actually adopted by one of our foster parents, and they had it, and she ended up sneaking it out of their file cabinet actually whenever we were teenagers. And so I have it all. I have everything. So I have all the receipts to back up my book, which was very important to me. There's a lot of stories that I wasn't able to put in there just because I didn't have the proof that I wanted to have in case it was ever questioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were living in the woods, you were homeless, living in a bar, and then what happened?
We were turned in. My mom was turned in several times by people that saw us, and many people tried to help. There were all these type of angels that just kind of came and helped and tried to get us away. And finally, we were taken away and put into some foster homes. But all of the foster homes we were in, except one, were absolutely horrific. I mean, the abuse was mind-blowingly almost. It would have been. I remember being very young and wishing I was dead, because that was much better than what was happening to myself and my siblings. And that's not a thought that any child should have to. No. I was 4.5 years old the first time I remember thinking that. But I literally, as my mom's drug habit got bigger and her prostitution got crazier, she let her Johns, I guess, the guys, have sex with myself and my sisters. And so that was obviously pretty hard. I was able to overcome a lot of that trauma because I did the work, and that's very important. That's what I talk about a lot in my book. Is the rest is up to you, afterwards. But I did the work, and I was able to overcome. But one of the hardest problems I had was overcoming the memories of seeing I literally held my sister's hand many times while she was raped, while we were laying there in a pallet, and these people would come, and we'd have to pretend like we were asleep, and we knew what not to do, because if I opened my eyes, then we would all be beat, or they would take my sister to another room, I just knew protocol. So all I could do was just stay there and hold her hand. Until this day, I haven't let her hand go. And she's 3.5 years older than I am. But I actually dedicated my book to my older sister. Wow, because Cody. She changed my diapers. She fed me. She had to find food out of dumpsters to feed myself and my two little brothers. The police found my oldest sister actually once in a dumpster gathering food for us. And then one day when we were living under a bridge, I saw the cops come pull up with my sister in the car and took us to DHS again. But then in turn, they would give us back to our mother. Things were very different in the late 70s and early 80s. In fact, our story changed a lot of those laws for foster kids. Before us, there was no law that says that they had to do surprise inspections. They'd always give them warnings. We encountered a lot of abuse in these group homes and foster homes as well. And before that, they could just keep putting kids in there, as many as you wanted. The more kids, the bigger the paycheck. So now there's a cap, a limit to how many kids can be in there. So many different things. So some good definitely came out of that stuff. And one reason, I know you asked me earlier why I wrote this book, was just because they say that when you go through hell that you should turn around and hand out buckets of water for those people that are still there. And this book is definitely my bucket of water, because I see so many people that as they grew up, when I grew up, I just kind of put all of that behind me. I did all the emotional work. As things came up, as things presented themselves, I would recognize them and I would tackle them. I'd never suppress. I never did any of that stuff, because if I kept that going, then that means those people won, that those people that hurt myself and my siblings won. So I rose above it and I healed myself, and I showed myself that they had no control.
How did you know that when you were a little kid, a vulnerable kid? How did that happen?
It's such a strange, so many people ask me, why is that different for you? Especially when my two little brothers are still homeless and in and out of prisons. My oldest sister, like, married a cult leader, like all these things. And something very different happened in my life that I can't fully take credit for. I was just made differently, to be honest. And I remember even as a 4.5-year-old boy and seeing one of my abusers while he was abusing me, I remember looking in his eyes and distinctly thinking, this is a broken person. I didn't cry. I didn't think, what is wrong with me? I just saw that that person was so broken and that he was hurting me because he was broken, not because I was broken, not because of anything I was doing. Something in my soul just gathered that information and protected me, I think. I don't know. I can't take credit for that type of thing. But for some reason, I've always had this compassion for humanity in general. And I just know that hurt people hurt people. That doesn't give them a blank check by any means. You do your work, you fix yourself, you heal yourself, because you're going to hurt someone else if you don't. It's very important.
Okay, so then eventually you were actually adopted by a family. Tell me about that, Cody.
After we were finally bounced around all these homes and everything, we were put in a therapeutic foster home where we were one by one separated into different homes. My brothers and sisters got these wonderful kind of middle-class families that adopted them, and they were just beautiful souls. And I was adopted by a multimillionaire. And so my brothers and sisters were extremely jealous because I got the rich family, but this family is also extremely religious. And I don't know if they sensed somehow when I was younger that I was gay or whatnot, but I know as soon as I was adopted at 7 years old, they started trying to tell me about their religion. And I looked them right in the eye over the kitchen table and said, I don't believe that. And after that, they just completely shut down. And my adopted father used to take me into the barn and take my clothes over my head and all the way to my ankles and would whip me from my neck to my ankles, trying to get demons out. My adopted mother said there was a demon that was a hold of my heart that wouldn't let me believe in Jesus and believe in their specific brand of religion. And I just was a stubborn kid and I held out. I just would not concede. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that there was an apple. I just didn't believe these stories that were being told to me and I had never really heard of religion at that point. I had just been trying to survive. I didn't have the religion thing. So I have a very strong spiritual and religious faith today, and not their religion by any means.
They were trying to beat you out of yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't quite gather all of that part, but
which is incredibly fucked up.
Right. Yeah, so I went to school, and this is where Casa and those people that are watching and those advocates can really step in, because I didn't have an advocate. I was my own advocate. I relied on the kindness of strangers, which I actually pushed away because if they did turn my dad in, who was extremely good looking, my adopted dad, who was extremely good looking, very charming, very wealthy, nobody was believing that they took this boy in off the streets and then started beating the holy hell out of him. Nobody would have ever believed that. And he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. He thought he was doing the work of God. And I do mention in my book that no harm was meant, yet harm was certainly done. So I go to school. I went to a private Christian school, and they loved him and everything. And so there were a few kids that knew, that had seen some marks on me and stuff. Finally, whenever I was about 14, they did a scoliosis test where they bend you all the way over and they touch your toes and they lift your shirt and check your spine. They went to lift my shirt and my clothes from my neck, from my ankle were stuck to my body. They called the police right then, and the police came to the school. And
right, so your clothes were stuck to your body because of the wounds, because of the bleeding, because of the...
I have scars now from my neck to my ankles from whip marks and things, but my wounds were open. And whenever he was beating me, he didn't wait for my wounds to heal. It was just whenever he felt like I was doing something wrong or what was wrong. This is who, and again, he thought his heart was in the right place. He's actually a really amazing man in certain aspects. This guy that adopted me, but the things that he did to me were just inhumane, 100%.
Right. Are you in touch with them now?
No. I was for a while, and I called him about 15 years after I had seen him the last, because I was having some issues with my own son, and I raised my son mostly on my own. And one night we were having an issue, and I was getting upset, And I just saw this look in my son's eye, like, what is your deal? And I realized what I was getting upset about had nothing to do with my son. It had to do with my own issues that I hadn't resolved. And like I said, if something surfaces, I will tackle it. I called that man, who was probably 60-something years old at the time, at 10 o'clock at night, knowing they were in bed. And I said, listen, I have something that I need your help to heal with. And he literally agreed to have breakfast with me the next day. And I went to breakfast with him, and we spoke about a lot of these things. And I mean, he cried and he apologized, which was fantastic. But I just knew that I needed some sort of healing that I wasn't able to do on my own. And I needed to have that conversation with him. And that was a lot. I know this sounds a little bit vague. It makes a little bit more sense in my book since it's like a whole chapter. But
it sounds that took quite a bit of courage, Cody.
I didn't have a choice. I was affecting my son at that point. And all I was doing was yelling at him for not. We were putting the Christmas tree up, and I always wanted, since I didn't have those beautiful childhood memories, I always wanted to create those for him. And I did a pretty good job, I think. But this particular night, I was 14 years old. I mean, we have amazing memories, if I say so myself. But anyway, this particular night, he was 13 or 14, and I was trying to decorate the tree, and I'd gotten a record player to play Christmas carols. I loved having a record player next to my tree playing Christmas carols. And anyway, I was trying to have this whole moment, and all my son wanted to do is watch TV and eat pizza. And I was just like, look, we're going to sing some Christmas carols, and we're going to put on our happy face. And he just wasn't getting it. And so I was getting myself more upset because I had this cute little thing, this image of how this night was going to go. And finally, after I was in a state yelling, I was like, why? I'm trying to do this. And then I just saw his look in his eye with a piece of pizza, like a deer in the headlights, like, what the hell is this dude doing? And I just realized that I was reacting from my own pain, and I was projecting that onto him. So I shut it down. I stopped right then, and I apologized, and I went into my bedroom and sat on the floor and called my adopted dad that I hadn't talked to in almost 15 years and said, listen, I have an issue. And it was just a little bit of healing, and I knew that it had been boiling up, and I needed to hear his side, whether he validated my feelings whatsoever. I just needed to have a conversation, and in that moment, it all kind of came to a head.
How did you end up as such a young father? How did that happen?
Well, I was in an orphanage at 15. After they made my adopted dad send me away. They sent me 6 hours south to an orphanage in South Arkansas, the Arkansas Baptist Home for Children, and my son's mom lived there. She was also an orphan there. So she became my little girlfriend, and I didn't really understand I was gay then, and she just didn't understand she didn't want to be a mama then. I mean, we were kids. We were just, today I'm very close with her. She's kind of like a sister to me too, but she's just, I don't know how to say this. She's, I think I was a lot more maternal than she was. And so we just agreed that I was going to raise my son, and I actually gave her child support the entire time I raised him because the court gave her custody after our divorce. But I was adamant that I wanted to raise him because she just didn't seem to be that involved. Anyway, I'm sorry. So I became a father. She was my girlfriend. I left the children's home 2.5 years later when I was almost 18 and went to a couple other foster homes and then joined the Army. And when I came back from the Army, she was pregnant with one of my friend's babies. And that guy was black, so it was obviously not my baby. So I was on my way to Colorado to be a river guide on the Arkansas River. I was going to take tourists down the kayak and everything when I got that call that she was pregnant. And they were going to send her away to like a pray the baby away camp and basically force her to adopt the child out and, in a very religious environment there as well. So she called me crying, and I literally turned around and bought a little four-door sedan and went down and got her from the children's home. About 3 months later, she ended up having a miscarriage, but we were already playing house, and we got pregnant again. I guess we just didn't know how not to get pregnant. We were still so young. So my son was born whenever I was 20, and I was with his mom until we got divorced when I was 23, or just before I was 23. And then we became really good friends after that.
How do you think that you were able to be such a present and loving father when you never had that yourself?
I knew what not to do. I knew what true, deep pain felt like, and I just went the opposite direction. And I say that so quickly because so many people have asked me that. In one of the interviews that was done with my son, they asked what he thought about his dad. He said, he couldn't believe I was so nice after what I had gone through as a child. And that was so validating. That small, he was like 16 at the time. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know he thought I was nice, the teenagers. So that was pretty validating as a dad.
And then you joined the military, but they discharged you.
Yeah, I was in basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then I was a mechanic in the military. And then I went to my AIT, Advanced Individual Training, in Aberdeen, Maryland. And while I was in there, I was a squad leader, and I was, top ranked in my platoon and everything, and I was just kind of loving it. But I was having nightmares at night that I didn't really know about. My roommate turned me in because he woke me up several times. And he was this huge, 6-foot guy. He woke me up several times with huge eyes, what is happening? Apparently I was yelling in my sleep, and he told my drill sergeant that it was alarming him. And they sent me to a psychiatrist there, and they diagnosed me with PTSD from my pretty heavy abuse in my childhood. And they said that the drill sergeants yelling and all of these things are just kind of triggering and unleashing it. And remember, I was 18 years old, so the abuse wasn't that far behind me at that point.
No, you were still a young man. You were, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so, although I'd like to think I was grown, I was still a child. They sent me, and I had no choice. In fact, my drill sergeant shook my hand before they put me on the plane. He said, "I wish the military had more soldiers like you." I mean, everything is exactly how it's supposed to be, because knowing myself now, I'm not made for military. That's not my thing. I do appreciate all those that are in it, and I do appreciate the time I had there, but I think everything happened exactly how it was meant to.
So how did you end up to be a single dad and be able to support yourself and your son and make a life?
Well, once I got out of the Army, I went to barber school. I was volunteering at this nursing home just because we had done that in school as a field trip several times, and I just loved it, so I just kept it up. It became a thing, and I kind of bonded with some of the elderly people in these homes. And I looked like I was 10 years old. I've always looked way younger than I am. So I would go in, and these older people and their families weren't visiting, and I would just go sit on the side of their bed. And I realized that was just a wealth of wisdom for me there. And so I would go room to room and sit on the bed, and I would take in a bottle of water or some tea or something, just something to get the sit down and give it to them. And then I would say, what wisdom do you have to pass on to me? Someone just starting out in life. You've already obviously had long lives, as he told me. And so many of them would just talk for hours, and I would just soak it up. And one lady in particular asked me what I wanted to do as a career-wise, and I had no idea. I was so young. And she said, let me give you some advice. And she told me to write down on a piece of notebook paper all of the things that I knew I wanted out of my job, and all the things I knew I didn't want out of my job. And so that was great. So I wrote down a notebook paper. That was before iPhones and everything, of course. And some of the things I wrote that I can remember were, I wanted to work in air conditioning. I wanted to be artistic, just as many small details as I could. I wanted to work with people because I love people. I'm very artistically, I can't do math, but I can draw or paint anything at any time. Those are my strengths. And so I just kind of leaned into my strengths. And also, I wanted a job where there was no limit to how much money you could make. The harder you work, the more money you make. So I kept that piece of paper in my pocket, and every time I heard of a job, I picked up that piece of paper and read it. And about 2 weeks later, I went to get my haircut at a barber shop, actually. And I went back out and sat in my car, and I pulled out my paper, and it was literally, the barber's job was literally everything on my list. So I drove straight from there to a barber school. So once I was in the barber school, my instructor, the owner of the thing, a few months into it, pulled me aside. He said, Cody, I think you have more talent than what this is going to require. He said, I want you to go to master barber school and then start learning how to do women's hair and everything. So I had no idea the depth of this industry. I just had envisioned myself to be like a little barber on the old square somewhere, doing $8 haircuts, which is amazing, would have still been amazing. But that conversation that he had just pulled me. And again, going back to CASA, you never know what kind of little one phrase or one conversation you have with a child can inspire them for the rest of their lives. So now, 26 years later, I've had an amazing career. I'm still having an amazing career. I work with some phenomenal celebrities, and I work with some phenomenal everyday people. And I travel all over the country. I work in D.C., San Francisco. Some clients just fly me wherever they are. And then I go to Arkansas still every 6 weeks, where my 3 grandchildren are and my son lives. So I spend 1 week working and 1 week with my grandchildren every 6 weeks.
Wow, that's nice.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
So how do you feel when you're working on someone's hair, say a regular person or a celebrity? How do you feel when you're doing it?
I believe in something called soul talking. I believe that whenever you're speaking to someone, your soul's also having a conversation with them. And sometimes when people sit in my chair, they say things that they don't really know that they're wanting to say. And then I have an answer that comes from my soul. And it's just beautiful exchange of energy. And I have the most beautiful conversations in my chair that changed my life and changed the clients' lives. And so how I feel while I'm sitting on when I'm doing hair is just extremely human, extremely vulnerable, and extremely giving. I feel like I'm giving a piece of myself and I'm taking a piece of them. I feel like I'm having an incredible exchange of humanity. That's exactly how I feel in my chair. And I have been gifted with the talent and worked really hard to hone my craft, that I know that everyone that gets out of my chair is also going to feel absolutely gorgeous.
This just sounds like an extraordinary experience. And the reason why I particularly feel that way, because when I was a young actor in Manhattan, I was a hair model for John Sahag, which I don't think exists anymore, but
Wow.
It was a big deal. And because I have a lot of hair and it grows fast and whatever. So I saw it as art. But then after that experience, whenever I would go get my hair cut or trimmed or whatever, it was very often less than that. The hairdresser maybe would say, "So, how was your weekend?" Or, "So you have a boyfriend?" Or something. And I didn't really want to talk with them. I just wanted to get the work done and get out. But it sounds like being in your chair is a totally different experience.
Oh, 100%. I think that most of my clients would definitely tell you that. And I usually overshare. I'm usually being horribly inappropriate at sometimes if I get real close to you. I'll just tell every detail of my life, and I'm literally an open book.
So I want to go back to what you said earlier about what was very important to you about writing the book is that you don't see yourself as a victim. You have gotten past what has happened to you. That doesn't mean you're not struggling with it regularly, I'm sure, because it isn't like it goes away. But you've come out the other side of it. Can you talk to me about that?
I think I saw so many people on my social media who I lived in orphanages with and shelters, and people who have reached out to me that knew about my life, or a friend suggested them be friends with me and stuff like that. So I'm watching all these people who had crappy childhoods, and I just I think instinctually, I just thought, that's over, that's behind me. I'm going to heal, do all the work to heal from that, and then move forward and have the best life I possibly can. And so I'm watching all these people on social media, waiting for them to do the same thing. And I just hit me one day that they're all still stuck there, spinning their wheels, and they're repeating their cycles. And they identify it as a victim, and they'll bring it up in almost every conversation. That's your telltale, though. And even if you meet someone for the first time, within moments of meeting them, they will tell you what happened to them. And that's obviously a trigger that they haven't healed. They're grasping for anyone to connect, or to maybe have the answer, or just they're identifying as a victim, and they're trying to show you that that's who they are. And all these things just did not make sense to me. So I think that I really wanted to inspire those people. I think writing my book and just living my biggest, best life I possibly can, I just kept thinking I would travel. I'd be like jumping off a mountain in New Zealand. I'd look back and think, are you guys coming? Not obviously that, but I just kept waiting, and I just thought, why are these people not wanting to go have their biggest, best? There's a whole world here. Our childhood is over. That abuse is over, or whatever happened to you is over. You do the work, you heal. I mean, that doesn't say that you're not going to have hiccups, but you just watch your patterns, and you find those wounds and you heal them actively. You don't wait for them to surface, So I think that I live my biggest, best life because I'm still trying to live as an example, and I just want absolutely everybody else to do that as well. And I do have my shortcomings, and I'm extremely open about that as well. I mean, while I was writing this book, I had a lot of flashbacks.
Yeah, like what? But because when I see you, I don't see any shortcomings. I just see like a hero. So,
oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I'll tell you what shortcomings I had, which might seem pretty obvious that I would have abandonment issues, but I didn't even realize that until much later in my life, where I would have an argument with someone and they would say, I'm going to go for a walk. Even my husband, he'd say, I'm just going to go for a walk and calm down, which is a very healthy thing to do. Go get a little space and calm down. But I would sit there on the edge of the bed while he was gone, or while someone was gone, and I would just vibrate, and I would just think, I would have this intense anxiety that was very much not who I perceived myself to be. And then one of my friends told me, he was like, well, Cody, obviously you have abandonment issues. And so I saw it at that point, and it made perfect sense to so many different things in my past. I had reacted to so many other things. And so I thought, okay, so how am I going to handle this? So the next time my husband was upset with me, because I'm a little bit annoying at times, and he's an absolute angel.
Okay.
Anyway, so he would leave, and I said, I just want you to say, when you are upset at me, if you could just find it within yourself to say, I love you and I'm coming back. And that simple phrase, because I had been abandoned by so many foster homes and so many people, I thought he was never coming back. And so that simple phrase, and me asking, being vulnerable enough to ask, say, would you please, even though you're mad at me and I'm being an idiot, please just stop and say, I'm mad at you, I'm leaving, and I'm coming back, and I love you. And those words that just changed myself. And now I don't really need him to say that, and I don't need anybody else to say that. I just know that they're coming back, and I'm worthy. I worked on a lot of the stuff I had to work on was being worthy and feeling like I wasn't a burden to people. I felt like because I do have a big personality, I can take up a lot of space.
Well, now I have another question. How did you figure out that you're gay?
Well, I didn't. I was always gay. Looking back now, I was obviously always gay. And a lot of people will ask if it's because of the sexual abuse in my early childhood. But, there's a lot of people that have been sexually abused it doesn't change their sexuality by any means. So that doesn't really track. After I got divorced from actually, I was kind of understanding I was bi. Actually, let me back up. I never quite identified as straight. I'd never really put any type of label on my sexuality. When I was with my ex-wife, she knew that I had been with both sexes. And I'm always very open. I feel like if I'm not open with other people, then I'm not being open with myself. And so I've always been a very good communicator, over communicating. But yeah, I think after my divorce, I dated men and women. I was just kind of on a self journey and realized that I connect with both genders differently, but sexually and emotionally, I connect much deeper with a man. So that's gay.
And what's your husband like?
Oh, he's a big, muscly, bald guy with tattoos, and he's from England. And when you see him from across the room, he's pretty intimidating, but he's the kindest, most giving, loving person I've ever known. I didn't even know that love like that existed. And that's beautiful. And I think that this is probably the first time I've ever truly been in love, or maybe even the first time I've been loved properly, I guess is a way to say that also. But he's extremely attentive. I don't think he's ever picked a restaurant for us to eat at. I don't think I've ever walked through a door he didn't open first. I mean, he's always thinking of me. He's always thinking of my emotions. He's always trying to make me happy. He brings little gifts home almost every single day. And as I guess you can't see, but my house is a little bit cluttered with all these wonderful tokens of love that he brings. Everyone has a love language, and I think his love language is kind of that attentiveness and gift giving. And he, by trade, is a bodyguard for A-listers here, and that tracks perfectly with me because I've never felt so safe in my life.
Right. So he really protects you.
He protects me.
Not only yourself, but your personhood, your love,
in every
and your
sense
emotions.
of it, for sure.
Wow, what a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah, I think everybody needs a Terry, but not mine.
Yeah, you don't want to share him, okay?
No, I'll share his energy, but.
So I ask all my guests this, and I want you to think about it if you can. What is the one thing about you that no one would ever know unless you told them? Now, it's a little trickier with you because you've written a book that's very, very personal, and you do share a lot. But what is the one thing that someone wouldn't know unless you told them?
I was diagnosed with Tourette's when I was 6 years old. And I managed to overcome that, or camouflage it in many ways. Not overcome, but camouflage it in many ways. I do guttural song. I have certain tics, is what it's called, TIC.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd make noises in the back of my throat. That has to be the right note, which is a weird thing. And I think that's a great question because I think everybody has something that off or oddly quirky about them. That's not necessarily a negative thing for sure. But yeah, Tourette's. I when I was younger, I would kind of yell at strangers. Apparently, I read that in my files. I don't remember that, but I'm sure that was pretty entertaining for whoever was standing next to me.
Right. So how do you manage it now? You're not on any kind of medication, or
I'm not. In fact, when I was 17, I was on 7 different medications that were at that children's home, and I shut it down. I took myself off all of them because none were necessary. I just, I think just being aware and watching and waiting for it, and it's all mind. It's mind over matter, honestly. I mean, my diagnosis was very mild. Obviously, it's not everybody could actually control that. Yeah, I watched for it. When I was little, I would shake my hair like this. And so I would stand in the mirror and wait for it and think that I was about to do it. And I'd wait for my hair was short, so I didn't have long hair to shake, but I would swing my hair like it was there.
Wow, interesting.
And I would just sit in the mirror and I would wait for that feeling to happen and I would fight it. I would watch myself in the mirror and I'd feel it well up. It kind of rises, it kind of builds. And then I would fight it and I would literally not let myself do it. And so that way, if I find that, I kind of lean over, or if I think I'm going to, I tend to, this is very vulnerable, but I cuss a lot, but some of that cussing is Tourette's cussing. And I disguise it as just a potty mouth. That's funny.
Okay, so what
I've never told anybody that. I mean, it's in my paper, but nobody's ever asked that. It's amazing.
Okay. And then I guess I have one more question. What would you say right now to a kid in care who's having a really, really tough time the way that you had, where it feels hopeless, where one adult after another fails you?
Find your people. Actively find those people because those people are trying to find you.
I think that's really good advice, Cody.
Yeah, look for those people because there's hands that are reaching out for you.
Yeah, because there are people that will help you, but you do have to find them. And, for a little kid to have to ask, holy crap. I mean, that's just crazy, right?
Right, yeah. There were many people that reached out and I hid from them because I didn't want them to see, because as a kid, and this is something adults need to know, as an abused child, if you tell on that person, you say, Mom is hitting me or beating me or molesting me or anything, then who you tell is probably going to go to that person and say, hey, what are you doing? And then they're going to smile and charm their way out. And then what happens is that child at some point is left alone with the abuser again, and it's worse. And then the next time someone reaches their hand out and says, hey, I know something's bad's happening to you. Let me help you. You say, no, it's not. Everything's fine. It's because you'd rather have the beating you're getting instead of the beating that will come from that. So just be very careful and reach out those hands gently. And you know what? Some of the most beautiful people in my life really were just there. A lady in my kindergarten, or that was the crosswalk guard, my kindergarten, she shed so much love to me. And just those 2 moments in the morning and in the afternoon that I felt like she was so safe, and all she did was walk me across the street with her stop sign. But she would stop, and every now and then she would look at my shirt, look for bruises, and I didn't know what she was doing. I was just like, what the hell is this chick doing in my... But she'd hug me, and then she would pull my shirt and look and stuff like that. And then she told this pastor that she had that came and talked to us. So there's people that are looking, to those babies out there, there's people that are looking to help you. Just let them help you.
Wow, thank you, Cody. Thank you very much for all of this.
That was fantastic.
You're an amazing person.
You know what? So are you. And I would love to be involved in whatever you're doing to help more. Maybe we can get this ball rolling, and who knows what can come from this. But I'm extremely open to that.
That's really great. That's really great. Thank you so much.
We'd like to thank Cody for sharing his story with us and for inspiring others to seek the help they deserve. In our next episode, we'll hear from Deron Bennett, who in his youth felt he had to take care of his brothers. And even though he lived on the street for a while and taught himself to read at the age of 11, he finished school, joined the Army, and became a signals specialist. And after his stint in the Army, he got into blockchain technology and started his own cryptocurrency with the intention of ending generational poverty. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org, and in LA, casala.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposto. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at bonusbabies.com. See you next time.